Welcome to INWED Talks, an initiative of the Women's Engineering Society that celebrates International Women in Engineering Day. INWED is the Women's Engineering Society flagship global campaign that highlights and creates a sense of belonging through the achievements, contributions and impact of women engineers, whilst inspiring future generations of women to pursue careers in engineering. These INWED talks are a series of conversations explaining the INWED 25 theme of Together We Engineer. And today we're doing that through the lens of the climate crisis, with insights from both participants' experience in the homeward bound Antarctica expedition. And to do this, I'm really delighted to welcome Rebecca Wade, Senior Lecturer in Environmental Science at Abertay University in Dundee, a member of the Climate Emergency Special Interest Group here at the Women's Engineering Society. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you.
And Susan McDonald, Director at Deloitte and Board Member here at the Women's Engineering Society. Thank you both for agreeing to record one of our INWED 25 INWED talks. I'll be facilitating you, both sharing your perspectives on climate emergency and how it's been shaped through your trips this year, Susan, and last year, Rebecca, to Antarctica with, as I say, the Homeward Bound projects. And by bringing together and sharing your perspectives from both your professional roles, which are quite different, and your Homeward Bound project experience, which is quite the same or slightly different. I'm going to do that bit again. I don't know why I was doing the same and different. I think I might just leave that bit. So let's dive in. It'd be really great if you could both introduce yourselves very briefly. Maybe Rebecca, we can start with you.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks so much for the invitation to take part in these INWED webinars. It's a great opportunity. So my name's Dr. Rebecca Wade. I'm an academic at Abertay University, which is in Dundee in eastern Scotland. And in my role, I do teaching and research. And my background's actually in geography and environmental science, but I predominantly teach civil and environmental engineering, and I bring sustainability and climate adaptation into my teaching. I'm really passionate about bringing creativity to civil engineering, but also seeing if we can bring more women into civil engineering, again, to share their own creativity and also to build a more sustainable future for us all.
Amazing, important work, and I love the combination and the focus on diversity and inclusivity. Thank you, Rebecca. Susan.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it's a great moment to be able to not only celebrate the contribution of women engineers, but to celebrate the contributions that we're going to have going forward. So thank you for the invitation. I'm an electrical mechanical engineer by background, and I've focused very much on the energy transition. So primarily early in my career, looking at how to connect offshore wind projects into the UK, and I now work as part of my role in Deloitte's sustainability team as their energy transition lead around how do we accelerate the pace to decarbonising our energy system. I'm also privileged to sit as a trustee in the Women's Engineering Society around not only how do we celebrate but champion the role of women engineers, and what a great moment in these celebrations to put a spotlight on the incredible contributions that women engineers continue to make in our society. And Rebecca, your point around curiosity, different types of leadership very much resonate. So really looking forward to discussing that today.
Amazing. Thank you, Susan. Quite an open question to start with, and Susan, perhaps you can start, but can you perhaps share what International Women in Engineering Day means to you in the context of climate action?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, it's a big topic. I think, first of all, engineers have such, play such a critical role in all parts of the economy and the energy systems. Where I focus is the energy sector. And so when I think around the role of engineers, it's not only around focusing on delivering big, large infrastructure programs. It's also around how do we help the public and communities see the benefits of clean air, of having affordable energy. And I think taking it back to the celebrations of INWED, it's a real opportunity to sometimes stop and recognise and celebrate the fantastic work of engineers and women engineers in our society doing great, impactful work, but also a reminder actually that we still have a lot to do to take all parts of society on that change, not only in choosing engineering as a career, but also celebrating as a career. So, early careers, mid-careers, and now a big focus on career switchers. There's a really exciting career for women, and actually having a diverse, inclusive workforce. A key thing for Homeward Bound was around actually having diverse voices at the decision-making table is really important. And as we look to what is a challenge, climate change is one of the kind of the biggest challenges of our lifetime. And I think what's really important is that we think about how are we solving things that support all parts of society and not just one voice.
Yeah. So true, so true. Rebecca, same question, but I don't know if you want to, anything that Susan said there really resonated with you.
Oh, absolutely, almost all of it. And I would concur. I just think that in terms of, International Women in Engineering Day and the climate challenge and also climate opportunities that we face, I think that the two things together just absolutely go beautifully, in the sense that two of the things I've been working on for almost my whole career is equality, gender equality in STEM, and also climate adaptation, and thinking about how we can embed sustainability in what we do. And both of those issues are huge and they're intersectional. So when we talk about intersectional issues, we talk about things that overlap with each other. They can't be dealt with in a silo on their own. And that's exactly why we need those voices around the decision-making table, as Susan was just saying. And for me, one of the things which I think is exciting about bringing INWED and climate change together is encouraging more of those voices to come around the table that might be thinking about how to adapt to climate change, but not be thinking about engineering, or perhaps the other way around, thinking about engineering, but not thinking about climate adaptation. And if we can think creatively, do that curiosity piece and bring creativity into the solutions that we develop, we will get better solutions, and there'll be more inclusive solutions, and they'll be considering multiple factors that need to come together to solve the problem. So I think INWED enables us to, and reminds us to, highlight possibility for people in terms of their careers and in terms of addressing climate change, but also opportunities for people in terms of their careers, whether it's career switching or starting from school and going into an engineering career, and opportunities that can come from collectively and collaboratively addressing climate change. So I like to think that while there are still big challenges in terms of gender equality in engineering and in terms of climate adaptation, that there's also big opportunities. And those are the bits that I really like to focus on, in terms of thinking, well, if you care about this subject, have you ever thought about maybe being an engineer? Because across the engineering spectrum of careers, there's so many ways that you can contribute to climate adaptation.
Yeah, I know you raise a couple of really great points there, Rebecca. I think that piece around women really being drawn to careers that are purpose-led, and then opening up that fact that perhaps it's a bit of an entryway into repositioning engineering and what it means to be a woman in engineering. So I really love those points. Thank you. And can I just draw you a bit back to the Homeward Bound project there, Rebecca, and perhaps you can talk about how your participation in the project really shaped your perspective on engineering's role in tackling climate change.
Well, first of all, I think that it widened my own sort of horizons and perspective in terms of the types of careers and specialisms that all the other women on our voyage had. So Susan and I both went on different voyages, but we both were on a ship of 80 or 100 women who travelled south to Antarctica for several weeks. And during that time, we would have both experienced a symposium at sea, which is when each of the women had the opportunity to talk about the way in which their career and their aspirations and maybe even their hopes for collaboration and outcomes, from the voyage. And so the Homeward Bound experience really kind of opened and widened my own horizons, both geographically from being in Antarctica, but also from hearing individually from each of these women about their contribution to society and their hopes and dreams and aspirations. And many of them were engineers, or they were engineering adjacent. So they were scientists, technicians, engineers, mathematicians, somewhere within STEM. And also the number of them using arts, culture and creativity in what they were doing, or as an addition to what they were doing. We had one contributor, one participant, who had an art exhibit on the International Space Station.
Amazing.
Another one who had qualified to become an astronaut. We had others who were basically being the legal representative for whales in the ocean. And when you start to think about how we can, approach our life, our interests, our passions in a different way and see that through somebody else's lens, it really did give me this broad and, as I said before, intersectional idea about how we can address what we do. And I think if you want one word on that particular question, it was collaboration. It was about collaboration amongst engineers and others to address the climate challenge.
What a brilliant segue into this year's theme of Together We Engineer.
Absolutely.
Nicely done, Rebecca. No, I hear you on that, and I think that's really interesting perspective that it was creating that network, and wherever you're going is creating those network of networks to enable us to engineer together. Susan, what about you? What really shaped your perspective on engineering's role in tackling climate change as you went on the Homeward Bound expedition?
So it's I think it's fair to acknowledge the Antarctic expedition was the immersive experience. That was the end of the program, but the front end of the program was 12 months. And it was mainly in addition to work. So you had early morning, because it's international, so we were kind of early mornings and late nights. So it was a real personal commitment. And what I really valued was actually people would feedback. They knew when I was I had a call, because I was much more clear of my asks, much more like articulating what was expected. Because if, like many of the other incredible women, we're all talented, but you take things on, and I was like, well, I can take that on if this is the minimum requirement, this is the support I need, rather than just saying yes. And it was a real good reminder through challenging one another in that support network of how do you ensure that you're delivering impact. And so when I say that, it wasn't just impact at work. How are you delivering impact in your personal life, your community life, work life, and then beyond? And so when you started thinking about spheres like that, and it was the first time, it sounds quite nuanced, but it was the first time I was really asked to look at my personal life, my relationships, all aspects of relationships, and my work plan. And I was one of those people that thought that I've never really had a work strategy or plan. And it was the first time it was like, well, actually, what are the things that are important to me? Not just, I love working on projects that impact and deliver projects that I know are going to benefit the heart of society, but I love the support network I have. And sometimes those things are a bit challenging. We're all busy. And for me, I delayed my trip to Antarctica. I was very fortunate to go on the last Antarctic expedition because I became a mother. And so throughout my kind of Homeward Bound experience, I had a big personal life experience of really being clear of my why. why I do things. And it was a real strength in meeting, and it wasn't just those that were part of my cohort, it was people across different years. And we had a shared focus, and Rebecca's referenced it, on collaborative leadership. And I recognize that my leadership style of being collaborative and inclusive isn't always something that matches in sometimes my work environments or in that kind of geopolitical stage. And it's really helpful to kind of frame it. When I was on board Antarctica, there was a lot of changes happening in policy. There was a big draw back from using the words diversity, equity and inclusion on the global stage, depending which geography you were from, and being confronted on that when you were on a program focusing on women leaders who are driving sustainable leadership. It was a real challenge of, well, do you know what? It's important to be aware of that, but actually there's strength in that network, but it doesn't stop the good work and impact that we will make together and will have. And so my kind of reflecting back, it was a really good reminder that for me, it reaffirmed the support network that I've got in my family, friends, and my work colleagues to deliver really impactful projects, but also one where I kind of like Christina Figueres, who's associated with Homeward Bound, we need stubborn optimism. And actually, there's a lot of strength by together we can move forward, because outcomes for climate are outcomes for businesses. And I think that, and it's just understanding language. And I think being on a boat with people with different languages, we had to work and how we supported each other with different languages. That was a really good footnote of, as we step forward to drive positive outcomes, to combat climate change, look at climate change adaptation, actually some changes in language are going to help us accelerate with pace. So yeah, there's so many things still to process, given I kind of returned back, it was January and February of this year, but has given me more excitement and energy to how we take this forward together.
Oh, that's really great. And Rebecca, perhaps I can bring you in here. And was there some things in what Susan said here about how the leadership and the collaboration aspects of the Homeward Bound really strengthened perhaps your ability to drive climate into your work back home?
Yeah, I think so. Well, for sure. And what Susan was saying about that long lead in, that it's a leadership program.
Yeah.
So we didn't sign up just for an expedition. We signed up to work outside of our normal hours for a year ahead of time. And in my case, it was actually a lot longer, because I was due to voyage in 2020. And of course, nobody went anywhere in 2020 because of the global coronavirus pandemic. So it was in fact not until the very end of 2023 that I went. So sort of 4 years in the waiting, and delighted to be able to go in the end. But all the way through it, we had that leadership training, the mentoring, the coaching, the supporting each other through our cohort networks and cross cohort networks. So that leadership was really vital. The leadership training, the self-reflection, which I think Susan was really talking about, and I'd just like to echo that and say that maybe we don't, as individuals who are very busy and very stretched, maybe we don't take time out to reflect, to sort of think about, well, hang on a minute, what's important to me and how am I prioritizing that? Where are the things that give me the drive, the passion, the kind of energy to do the things that are important to me? It's not just a career, it's a vocation. And that should be for the things inside our working life and outside of our working life too. And I think it encouraged me that we should all have good workplace culture, that we should recognize and celebrate diversity, that we should bring those understandings of different personalities, different styles of learning, different styles of leading into the forefront of our perception, and think about, being inclusive and being collaborative and taking forward together, but with that personal reflection of knowing what drives us and understanding it might not be the same as the things that drive others, and enabling others to be driven by the things that are important to them. So I've perhaps sort of slightly gone off the question, but you asked me to reflect on what Susan was saying.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great, Rebecca. And I think it is really interesting to hear about the Homeward Bound as a leadership program. I think that's really, really interesting. And you both raised some really rich points around what you learned about yourselves and how you're going to take that forward into your work. But I do want to bring us back to the global warming piece, and I'm interested to know from you, Rebecca, first, and then coming on to Susan, what were the most striking impacts of global warming that you did witness firsthand, and perhaps sort of just growing that, if you explain that, but then talk about, you know, the moments during the exhibition where the role of engineers felt particularly vital in addressing some of those impacts that you saw firsthand. Rebecca, can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things about visiting Antarctica is that it's just vast and awe-inspiring and, you know, almost undescribable in terms of the experience of being there. And what we could see when we were there was a snapshot. You know, if we had not been there previously, it would be difficult for us to tell how what we were seeing on our voyage was different to previously. But one of the things that happens when you go to Antarctica, regardless if you go as a tourist on an expedition or on a voyage such as the one that we did, there has to be a scientific component. There has to be an educational component. So the IATO, the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, insists that for everybody going, they have to not just comply with the rules of engagement with, you know, making sure that we're biosecure and we're not bringing disease and we're not, you know, harming the place that we're visiting, but we also have to learn about it. And in that learning, both on the voyage and prior to the voyage, I learnt about the dwindling sea ice extent around Antarctica. I understood that some of the places that we were able to take our ship on our voyage would not have been accessible at that stage in the season in previous years. Wow. I learned about the numbers of Antarctic species that have been affected, not just due to human, let's say, fisheries and whaling and stuff like that over many centuries, but also due to the human impacts of climate change. And it really resonated with me that, you know, here was I coming from 56 degrees north in the northern hemisphere to beyond 60 degrees south in the southern hemisphere. And the things that we do every day at home in Scotland, in the UK, in the northern hemisphere have affected the climates and the climatic conditions of the Antarctic continent and the Antarctic ice so much. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, you know, Antarctica doubles in size in the winter because of the sea ice extent. Amazing. Antarctica as a continent is massive, and yet it doubles in size and area because of the sea ice extent. And what we've seen over the past couple of decades particularly, but accelerating in the last decade or so, is a reduction in that sea ice extent. And when we get a reduction in the sea ice, we get a change in the reflective quality of the area. So we're not getting as much reflection of light and warmth back into the atmosphere. It's being absorbed by the Southern Ocean. And the currents change and the ocean chemistry changes, and we start to see that we're getting ocean acidification, which is affecting crustaceans. We're getting ocean warming, which is changing currents. We're getting more and more impacts, and it's almost like like a snowball effect. There's a knock-on effect. We've started the effect many decades ago, and now it's accelerating. And it's accelerating beyond what even the climate scientists were predicting. Wow. So as well as seeing that we could access places in the Southern Ocean, around the Antarctic Peninsula, that maybe we shouldn't have been able to if things were the way they were half a century ago. We also learned a lot, both on the expedition and beforehand. So the climate impacts, which is what you specifically asked me about, were driven home to me over not just the period of the voyage, but in that period of learning and sort of information exploration beforehand. And I mean, you'd be the same. If you're going on holiday somewhere, or you're visiting somewhere for work, you suddenly get a greater interest in, you know, information about that place. You watch a documentary about it, you seek out maybe an academic paper or, you know, something like that. So I really kind of upped my game in terms of my Antarctica knowledge. And it really did drill home to me the amount that we're affecting, that climate change, which is instigated by those of us on terrestrial sort of temperate areas of the world, is really driving the ice loss in this icy southern part.
Yeah, and Susan, I'd like to bring you in. I'm sure your experience is the same, and please do share if there's anything over and beyond what Rebecca's just said there. But I'd really love to hear from you, Susan, from your role in the consulting point of view. Let's, you know, what do you believe are the most urgent engineering challenges that might sort of help us sort of, you know, Rebecca's kind of highlighted the issues. What are the most urgent engineering challenges that we should be addressing, that you're seeing in your work?
Yeah. So I think first, one of the biggest engineering challenges that we have is, through the energy transition, we need to develop and deliver a lot of infrastructure to enable access to offshore wind. And offshore wind, if we look at offshore wind, it's, and there's a big focus on really assessing environmental impact assessments. That was one of my roles, was coordinating that, facilitating that conversation around optioneering when at National Grid, and the same is true. So looking at, I work with organizations to secure the supply chain and workforce to deliver the infrastructure, connect offshore wind. So, in the lead up to my Antarctica trip, I was in Iceland last year doing some citizen research into killer whales with the Earthwatch Institute. And, it's, unique being surrounded by 70 killer whales, and you can't, and the insights you get around the impact of sonar. And so sonar is a key aspect, not only around surveying the seabed, but obviously used in defense. So I think we have to have some honest conversations around, given the world that we live, if we want to live a decarbonized system, we rely on minerals and materials that we're going to have to take from the ground. How do we do that responsibly? We're making choices and strategies around how do we deliver economic growth that communities can access high paid jobs. So I always come back to I don't think there's one solution. As an engineer, I very much really care about systems thinking, and I think unfortunately it does mean there's going to be some hypercare. So it doesn't, I don't think it's about minimizing our impact. I'd love us to get to zero impact, but I think we need to be honest that we're not yet there in this transition. And I think you're talking around those challenges. I think that point around Antarctica's primarily focus is around science and peace.
Yes.
And that is a unique place where you have a number of countries around the table that otherwise wouldn't be sitting around the table. And I think there's something that we need to recognise, is there's the importance of governance in decision making. And I think that's one of the key takeaways that I took away is, and the work that I do with clients is around, nothing, as culture and good governance are just two really key pillars in this transition. But equally underpinning that is good data and good evidence. And I think as engineers, we are, core to us is not only around, evidence-based data, but it's also thinking forward to the legacy. And I think as engineers, we have that ingrained in us. And what kind of stays with me in terms of my experience in Antarctica, and there's so many, because each day there's so many moments of reflection, happiness, moments of, you know, sadness. And there was one moment, there's like, you know, again, I feel like on that learning point, Rebecca, you mentioned, you know, there's 18 recognized species of penguins, and you know, they all have their own characters. I got to meet 3 of them. So Adelie penguins, Chintraps penguins, and Gentoos, and talking about that sea ice impact, the reduction of sea ice, or in, you know, 60% over the last 30 years, that's really negatively impacting Adelie penguins. So you're seeing it impacting one community versus actually Gentoos are thriving. So it's having an imbalanced impact on the communities and population. And I remember there was a moment where we're looking at a colony of penguins, and there was, you know, these parents, you know, feeding the smallest chick, and the sad thing is we knew that chick wasn't going to survive. You know, it was kind of almost watching, you know, the documentaries you've come familiar with David Attenborough, where there's great stories, but there's moments where it gets you pause. And I got upset because I'm a mum, and you put lots of energy into think that you knew that little penguin wasn't going to survive because of the wet precipitation. There's more rain, and so it's a moment when it's trying to fatten up its feathers, it's not going to survive because its size. And that was a moment of sadness, but then there was moments of celebration because you saw actually the colony's size, you know, based on the expeditions, had increased since they were last there. And so there was moments of that, and I think it was a real good reminder that, you know, at the heart of it, it's storytelling. So, you know, as an engineer, it's much about data, but through this, hopefully with you, Susan and Rebecca, it's a storytelling, because, you know, the last moment we're leaving Antarctica, and it depends your belief system, but you know, I do believe we're really intrinsically related to nature. A humpback whale out of nowhere came, and you know, I was there with another 122 women and non-binary individuals in science engineering, and she just danced us from one side to the other of the boat. And it was just, and that really has stuck with me around the beauty of nature, and you know, and how we work together, because I don't think anyone has the solution, but actually together we can. And I take a real hope, you know, and sadly it takes crises, but you know, in responding to COVID, people really cared about that mission of getting the country into a better place. And I think we need to really think about our mission is to get to decarbonise world, to get clean air, to allow people to get access to education. And I think the more we talk like that, you know, I was encouraged, all these people across the globe were talking like that, but the more we can bring that in to our decision making, it's going to be really important.
No, that's so powerful. I think hearing those moments of profound sadness, but then offset with those moments of profound hope, I think is really brilliant. Thank you, Susan. And talking about hope, Rebecca, perhaps I can come back to you. What are you telling your students, and what are they telling you about the role of women engineers, and the role they play in pioneering climate resilience and sustainable innovation? So that kind of two-way dialogue, both from you to your students, but then what are you hearing from your students about the role of women?
Well, it's wonderful that we have women engineers in the classroom. I mean, like others, I've been in the situation where, you know, I've been the only woman in the room, and I've been at the front, and and I'm not trained as an engineer, so I've had some battles sometimes to try and to get that balance. But I think we have an amazing set of role models and STEM ambassadors across the country now, and I know that we're still, you know, moving at a sort of glacial pace to try and get that equality across women in engineering. But what I hear from my students is that they find engineering rewarding. They're still not really being encouraged. Women, female students are still not necessarily being encouraged towards engineering at schools. So I think we do have a narrative that we need to try and shift. We need to change the dial on that a little bit, and perhaps do some more work with careers advisors, with geography and maths teachers and physics teachers, you know, not just in the engineering science and engineering and design subjects, but thinking about those related topics much more broadly, bringing in the idea of climate adaptation and engineering as a career pathway, because those of the female engineering students that I teach that have worked with me, and I specialize in nature-based solutions, so working with nature to deliver solutions, engineering solutions for our communities. And so when they start to, you know, work with me to learn about those areas where they can bring in an understanding of, you know, what we have now, how we can change it to be more sustainable, how engineers really have an important role to play in helping to deliver that transition. So we need a landscape transition, we need an urban transition, we need an energy transition. And a lot of my work is with sort of water transition, thinking about how we can manage water more sustainably. And working with nature is a really, really good way to do that. And it does help to inspire, I think, many of my students, men and women, to think, well, this is, you know, this is not necessarily what I expected from civil and environmental engineering, but I'm actually quite interested in it.
Yes.
And they go to their job interviews and their placements and they reflect back to me that that way of thinking has helped them to stand out in interviews. That way of thinking, that understanding about engineering sustainably has really helped them to move forward, to take opportunities. And I think it's because they can think outside the sort of traditional engineering box.
Yeah, and I think that piece that Susan alluded to earlier around the role of storytelling and the understanding of impact, that really is what engineering is all about, actually. So that's really, really interesting. Okay, so thank you both. And I think for my last question, you've kind of touched on some of these pieces throughout the whole talk, and it's been really lovely to speak to you both. But perhaps to finish, you can just share your personal commitment that you're going to be taking forward as engineers, as leaders, and as advocates for sustainability. Susan, do you perhaps want to go first?
Gosh, I think there's a real focus on we can engineer our future. And by that, I mean, you know, through the support, you know, the art of the possible is there. I think for me, what I really care about as a leader is, you know, how can I, but also how can I learn from others, and particularly voices that are not normally the voices that I come close to. So I think there's a learning opportunity that I'm committing to as a leader. But that kind of, what am I committing to? You know, we've just touched on it a little bit, is you sharing that story, because I know it was space that inspired me into engineering. So that opportunity through visiting Antarctica, hopefully we can captivate, you know, some young mind to pursue engineering. And so my commitment is to continue the outreach and just, you know, stay in touch. You know, the fact that Rebecca and I, you know, we're on different boats, but that shared interest, just staying in touch with that network, because I got so much energy and excitement from it.
Amazing. So important, networks, because that's another podcast. Rebecca.
Yeah, so thank you, Susan and Susan. It's been lovely having this conversation. And I think one thing that I have committed to and I've really been achieving is getting out there and doing the outreach and engagement. So I've been using all possible channels and audiences, both in person and online. I've spoken to thousands of individuals since I returned, and had wonderful feedback and follow-ups from many of those. So it's been really good. And I've been able to sometimes, you know, occasionally on International Women's Day, I've been invited to Dundee Science Centre to speak to 150 girl guides. So you've got an audience of young women right in front of you that can, you know, really start to, you know, say hello to Emma for sure, but to really get engaged with the idea of not just engineering, but of climate action. And I think that my main commitment was to yes, to understand the privilege that we had of traveling to such an amazing, precious, powerful place, but a fragile place too, and to share that experience as widely as I could in as meaningful a way as I could, because there were moments when I was there that I was just, you know, I was just brought to tears. with the idea of the fragility and our culpability in terms of the rest of the world and what we're doing, perhaps unwittingly at times, to our wonderful planet, because we only do have one planet and it's our home. We sometimes think within city boundaries or four walls or even regional or country boundaries, but we all share one planet. And we all have a responsibility to look after it. And so my real takeaway has been to try and give an honest but perhaps hopeful message based on my experience in Antarctica. And yeah, I'm just really trying to live in a way that I can feel comfortable with knowing what I know and helping others to try and do the same.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for the amazing work you do and the amazing impact you're having already. We look really forward to seeing what comes next for both of you. Thank you so much for repping for Scotland, and for repping for WES, and for repping for women in engineering. It's only through the work of people like you that we can hope to make an impact. So I think that's a really positive, hopeful note to finish on, even though you know, we are talking about the climate emergency here. I think there is hope. So thank you both so much, and good luck in everything that comes next.